I would be in Asda in Accrington. Old ladies would come up to me and say, when are you and Roy getting married? And I'd say, well, we can't because it's, against the law. And they'd be like, never mind that. And I'm like, this is how you change the world.
Right. Julie Hesmondhalgh made television history with her portrayal of Hayley Cropper, the first trans character in a British soap. Julie went on to star in groundbreaking television shows like Russell T Davies' Cucumber, Broadchurch, and the award-winning Mr Bates versus the Post Office. Now, she's taking on the West End with her heartbreaking portrayal of Joan, a grieving mother in James Graham's Punch. Hello, and welcome to What Do You Want to Talk About? I'm Ben, this is Julie.
Hi.
Julie, what do you want to talk about?
It seems like it's quite a heavy subject, but I'd like to talk about forgiveness today because it's been on my mind.
Okay, do you find yourself being good at forgiveness as a person?
I was thinking about this too on the way in and thinking that I would love to think of myself as a forgiving person, and especially with some of the people that I've had the privilege of meeting recently. But I think until that's really tested, it's an impossible thing to say. So actually, no, a slight is difficult for me to forgive sometimes. Just someone cutting me up in traffic is a difficult thing for me to forgive.
Yeah.
So I do understand that it's a huge and messy and difficult topic. It's made me look at myself very closely with the exploration that I've been doing of this subject recently. And I don't think that you can ever really know until it's put to the absolute test. What about you? What about you, Ben?
I was thinking about this. So there have been lots of people in my life who have done things to me that I would say were unforgivable.
Okay.
I have not found it in myself to be able to be like, I forgive you.
Yes.
But I have found it in myself to be like, I don't hold that feeling.
You've absolutely beautifully encapsulated what I think the philosophy of true forgiveness is actually, that it's not about the words. It's not about saying, I forgive you to someone. It's about letting something go in yourself and letting go of the harm so that you can live a healthy life, actually. And this is what I'm learning. So I should explain, shall I, about why this is such a big topic for me at the moment. So I'm doing a play at the moment called Punch, which is by James Graham, who is, widely known as our State of the Nation playwright. And it's based on the memoir of a man called Jacob Dunn, who was brought up in the Meadows Estates in Nottingham and on a night out in 2011 punched another young man. For no reason, just went in, thought his friends were having a bit of a scrap, went in, punched him in the face and killed him. James died from his injuries a few days later in hospital. He went to prison for not a very long period of time because he didn't obviously mean to kill James, and I think it was the injury hitting the pavement that ultimately killed him. But it's an extraordinary story, and it's set in a very socio-political backdrop because it's James Graham. So we talk about the architecture of social housing, our criminal justice system and how it doesn't serve young men in particular, toxic masculinity, alcohol-related violence, how common one punch is. And, once you start talking about this subject, the number of people who come forward and say, I know someone who died that way too. But at the heart of the play is this relationship between Jacob and James, the victim's parents, and primarily his mother, Joan, who I play in the play. What happens is through a process called restorative justice, they met up. Now, restorative justice is a system that exists as victim support, actually. It's a way of victims being able to get answers to some of their questions, but also to look the perpetrator in the eye. After they'd had this very carefully facilitated and curated meeting with Jacob, which was just an incredible moment. Jacob had nothing to gain from it. He'd already been released from prison. They started this, I would say now, friendship. And Jacob and John and David, James's parents, now share a platform and go into prisons and schools talking together about restorative justice, about One Punch, but also about forgiveness. And forgiveness is at the heart of this play. The meeting scene in the play is the sort of climax of it. And I can't tell you what an extraordinary thing it is to be on that stage with an audience every night and the pin drop silence. It's just four people around a table after a very sort of exciting, funny, lively play that's all about nights out in Nottingham and lights and music and gangs and
lads.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's very much how the play starts. And this is the sort of climax of the play: four people sitting in absolute silence around a table and talking to each other across the divide. And my God, don't we need that at the moment? Some talking to each other across the divide. And there is a scene that is taken absolutely verbatim from Jacob's podcast that he did alongside his memoir, where he asked John and David if they feel that they could forgive him. And Joan very quickly says, at the beginning, it was impossible for her to contemplate that she would be able to. But speaking to him and being with him and working with him has allowed her to release the bitterness that she felt about the loss of her wonderful son, and also the shortness of the sentence, all those things, and she can. But David, James's dad, said, I can't forgive you. And last night, because every Tuesday night we have these after-show discussions curated by this wonderful organisation, the Forgiveness Project, they asked Jacob how he felt about that. And Jacob said that the thing about forgiveness is that it's slippery and it's messy and it's nuanced, and it's not something that you can pin down easily, and it's certainly not about those words. And the fact that David speaks with Jacob, spends time with him, shakes his hand, shares a platform with him, that is forgiveness, actually. You can call it empathy, you can call it compassion, you can call it putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but more than anything, it's exactly what you so beautifully described, Ben, which is letting go of the bitterness and the hatred, because it eats you alive. So the play itself was, because it was based on Jacob's book, Jacob was involved from the very beginning. Adam, who runs Nottingham Playhouse, who directed the play, got in touch with Jacob and said, I think your book would make a really good play. Jacob had never been to theatre apart from to see Panto, and he was just like, he had to check that this person was, absolutely, kosher. And he then introduced him to James Graham, who's the busiest man in showbiz, and was just like, I haven't got time to write this play. And Adam was very master manipulator, got them together in a room, knowing that James wouldn't be able to resist. So the early drafts of the play were very, very about Jacob and from his point of view, and it could have been a one-man show, actually. But as it went on, they realised that a real missing link in the play was David and Joan. So bringing Joan and David into it came later in the process. That was very, very difficult, because they came to see a run-through of the play sort of midway through rehearsals in Nottingham in a very well-lit rehearsal room, and they were sitting about, a little bit further from me as you are now, and we were acting out some of the worst and most traumatic experiences of their life, turning off James's life support machine. And I'm a real believer in art and culture and theatre and telly changing the world. I'm a real believer in that, but I really questioned what we were doing. I thought, why are we putting these people through this? What is this? It felt borderline exploitative. I think we all felt it, but because of their incredible grace and generosity, they absolutely understood what we were trying to do with it. Everything that they are about now is making the world better and making sure that this doesn't happen to another family. They're just full of grace. That's the best way I can describe it. So yeah, we did the play in Nottingham where it had a huge impact, and we had a specially commissioned talking circle outside the theatre in the courtyard, and it seated about 30 people. And the nights when we'd have after-show discussions about forgiveness, hundreds of people would come into the courtyard and stand for an hour wanting to listen. And that now we're in the West End. I mean, this is just a wonderful thing. The producers, KPPL, Kate Pakenham and Philida Lloyd's production company, aren't taking any profits for this. So rather than it lose its soul when it goes into the West End, when it goes commercial, absolutely the opposite, because all their profits are going into educational work. James is paying for coach loads of young people from his old school in Mansfield to come down and see it. He did a schools matinee last week for 500 young people from schools in London with a higher than average pupil premium, and also schools where young lads actually had been expelled, not just from school, but also from pupil referral units. There was like specially bespoke, I suppose, social and emotional development schools. So these lads were on the front row in balaclavas, talking at this level at the beginning of the play, and we were ready for it. We were ready. We knew it would be spicy. And, it wasn't going to be like a West End polite Saturday night audience, paying like 95 quid a ticket or whatever. The reactions to some of the things that happen in the play, at one point Jacob, it's a bit of a spoiler, but gets his GCSE results. He goes back to school under the encouragement of David and Joan. When his brother announces his GCSE results, the roof came off. Absolutely incredible. It was just the visceral response to things in the play. And again, pin drop silence in the meeting scene, sobbing, audible sobbing. And then at the end, when we said we were having an after-show discussion, the real Jacob and Joan were there. It was like Beyonce was in the house. It was like, it was deafening. They were just so engaged with it and moved. And the questions after were so intelligent. And they were asking, what was the decision not to put James in the play? What would their advice be to young people who were trying to step away from violence? So many brilliant questions. And we're having another of those schools matinees as well. And there's discounted tickets for young people. Everything that it should be, actually. So, and every Tuesday night we have these curated discussions. It's a communal experience that can be transformative, actually, and I don't mean that in a wanky way. It's actually true. When we experience it, when you go to a gig, that's where you this moment where everybody's singing together, and it's transcendental, it's almost religious, and it is borderline spiritual sometimes, and theatre at its best can do that too, for sure.
The work you're doing with Punch is so incredible and inspiring, but that's far from the other inspiring work that you've done. I rewatched the first episode of Mr Bates versus the Postman yesterday. And I think what was interesting as you were just talking, the communal experience of theatre as a power for change. Yeah. But Mr Bates, as a power, as a communal experience as well.
Yeah.
The conversation around it.
It's incredible when that happens, when something just catches.
How did it feel knowing that suddenly?
It was absolutely incredible. We knew what everyone was trying to do with it and what was trying to say with it, and we all learnt so much from it because, like everybody, my knowledge of it was really patchy.
Oh yeah.
Just like the odd article or whatever, and there'd been some brilliant journalism around it, and especially there'd been this podcast on Radio 4 by Nick Wallace that had really gone into it, but it had reached a very limited audience, and because it had taken place over so many years, and it affected people all over in different ways. I think, again, it's the power of art to tell that story. And the big conversation the week after was why is it taking an ITV drama to do this, to make it in people? And I'm like, well, that's not, for me, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Because you see Monica Dolan surrounded by her receipts on the phone to the helpline, tearing her hair out while the debt's doubled in front of her eyes.
God.
I don't think anybody could watch it and go, that could have absolutely so easily have been me.
It's just perfect. It's such a perfect, beautiful piece of television that
it was absolutely incredible to be part of it, and the feeling of the nation and the way that it got around. It's very heartening that can still happen. And actually, what it's done is it's opened the door for lots of people have been trying to make dramas about social events like the blood contamination scandal. I know that people have been trying to get something made about that for years, and now it's being made. The hacking has just happened, the hacking drama. And of course, adolescence being such an international conversation now. I think it's a time for social, political dramas to change the world in some way, because telly has always done that on a grand scale. And I think we're coming into a new era of that, as we often do in dark times when there's a lot to fight back against. But yeah, I was very, very pleased to be part of that. And I've been dead lucky because, from Corrie, and I think it's Corrie that set me stall in that way, really, because, for you viewers that don't know, because I'm so old now, it's like,
I was actually looking back and it was 2014 you left. I was I swear it was yesterday.
Yeah, I know. So I've been out, it's nearly, 12 years, and I was in it for 16 years. So I went into it at the end of 1997, and at that point, and I was a trans character. And obviously I'm a cisgender woman playing a trans character. That couldn't happen now. But then it was and it was a joke, and this is not talked about as well. The writers, Roy Cropper, who's a sort of slightly odd cafe owner now, he was then he was cleaning, he was a caretaker at Deirdre's flats, was going to have a series of dates, and I was to be the first. And the denouement, the punchline of the storyline was that I was to come out as trans. And he would run for the hills, and then he would have some more dates and whatever. And I didn't know that. I would absolutely not have, guessed that. And thank goodness I didn't know that. So I went in going this is my Colin in EastEnders moment. This is my moment to change perceptions about things. Genuinely did. And I went in and I met David, who plays Roy, and we got on really well. And actually what happened is that they got saddled with that storyline. And people really got behind the relationship and wanted Roy and Hayley to be together so much. And I've said this so many times, but it's absolutely true. I would be in Asda in Accrington. Old ladies would come up to me and say, when are you and Roy getting married? And I'd say, well, we can't, because it's, against the law. And they'd be like, never mind that. And I'm like, this is how you change the world.
Right.
Because you see someone in your living room every night, you know them, and you want the best for them, you know, and you're just like, I want Roy and Hayley to be together. So that is the way then that politics goes like, oh, hang on, there's been a shift here. We got mentioned in Hansard, we were thanked in Parliament, you know, and trans community, you know, the political sort of side of it, Press for Change, who's a brilliant trans pressure group, were very against me playing this part. And they were very, very nervous about Corrie taking this storyline. But they soon found out that I was like an ally. And so we carried, I mean, you know, and it changed things for a while. Unfortunately, things have taken an absolute backward step now.
That's what I was going to sort of ask you about. Is this it's fascinating to me because it's sort of, this is happening. I was a little bit too young to remember you sort of first joining, but I really, my mum always, we would watch Corrie because we wouldn't watch EastEnders because EastEnders was a busman's holiday, she said. Because we're from the East.
Oh, so brilliant. Oh, that's interesting.
She's just like, no, we can't. It's just like watching your Auntie Sue. And I'm just like, what? How is
that's
Peggy
great. Whereas
Mitchell?
Northerners are just like, it's like watching my Auntie Sue. It's like, that's why we watch it.
No, she's just like, oh no, it's far enough away. But I vividly remember that, and I vividly remember it's around the same time when Nadia, I can't remember her last name, won Big Brother.
Yes.
A trans woman that won Big Brother. And just thinking, that's 20 years ago, the seismic shift. Can you imagine if you joined Coronation Street now?
The great thing is there's so much trans visibility now in a way that there just absolutely wasn't then. You know, it was an anomaly then to see a visible trans person, even though I'm not a trans person, but portraying that. And what it did was open up a door. And when I did Russell T Davies's Cucumbers straight after Corrie, you know, they were looking for a trans actor to play Helen in it. And they were really struggling to find someone. And I was doing a lot of press at the time saying that it was anachronistic for me to be playing Hayley now. That's not why I left, but it would have been an anachronism. I left at exactly the right time. It would have been hard to justify a cisgender person playing that part. And so Russell and the team had to look a bit harder for somebody to play that role because they knew, they were just like, oh, Julie keeps going on about we can't cast a cisgender person. And it's like, because it was right on the cusp of that being a conversation. And I am a bit sick of like people pitting people against each other and putting two separate points of view about something, you know, where it's someone's existence versus someone's opinion, you know, and I think that's a very, very difficult thing.